I think that eventually, once we kind of get through this content, we kind of work our way through this reporting and this story, that you had, offered to bring some people up to ask some questions. And so obviously we're going to be very judicious in how we do that. However, I think that what you came out with in regards to the Trump assassination attempts is actually pretty groundbreaking. I don't know if a lot of people caught it. I did attach that clip that Blaze put out. I want to say at this point it was 13 hours when I posted to the space, so it's probably been 20 hours at this point. But that's a pretty big deal here. So I appreciate you being here, Steve. But if you
Yeah.
want to introduce yourself to folks and maybe kind of get a little background here, I was kind of explaining how you were one of the guys that was checking in with Capitol Police before you were with Blaze, and just basically combing through the thousands of hours of January 6th tapes and trying to put out reports on it long before anybody else was talking about it, before any pressure on House Republicans were even existing on releasing this tape and releasing these footage. You were one of the guys at the center of that.
Well, I will tell you, I certainly was not the first one out there. We had a lot of other people putting pressure on um, Congress to get this CCTV from the Capitol out related to January 6th. And of course, I could run through the names. There were roughly four others that preceded me in the process. Obviously, we remember Tucker was the first out of the chutes, the first one. He and his team were granted access by McCarthy first, and then I think I won't get the order exactly right, but after Tucker mysteriously withdrew from the process, then they opened it up, and they were doing I'll give a little bit of insider baseball here to what was happening with the congressional committee that has control over those CCTV videos. They were doing a little bit of R&D, research and development, on how they wanted to grant access, because you've got to understand there are thousands of journalists in this country who would love to get into that room, and there's no way that the committee, with the limited staff that they have, could manage that. And in fact, in the building, the congressional office building where these video terminals are that are hooked up to the actual hard drive that had the copy of the January 6 videos, there's only three terminals, and then you only have 8 office hours a day, and 5 days a week, and thousands of journalists on all manner of political predispositions wanting to get in and look at this video. And so they basically used a small handful of us as guinea pigs to figure out how they could administrate that. So what happened is, essentially right after Tucker, John Solomon, Julie Kelly, Joe Hanneman, who was with Epic Times at that time, he's with us now at the Blaze, and then myself. I was the fifth guy to get access as well. And so after we did several weeks and up to several months of that, then suddenly we lost access to the terminals because, if you recall, there was a change in the speakership last year. Sudden change. The former speaker was voted out, and then it took a few weeks for current Speaker Johnson to be voted in. And so we lost access to the terminals. We lost access even to the video that we had already harvested and the video that we had already requested. They wouldn't even release it to us for a long time. It was a matter of several weeks, video that we already had in the queue to have downloaded and sent over to us. And there's an approval process, because just because we had seen something in the video room didn't mean that they were going to give it to us, because there are some sensitive and highly sensitive areas of the Capitol. They had to run a lot of that through security review. If you remember, and those of you that saw Tucker's first couple of nights where he released some video, there were blurred out sections in his video. We had to do the same thing for some of our presentations. And we were fortunate, though, that once Johnson was in, we got access back not only to the requests that we had made for the timestamps and the clips that we had requested, but we also got access back to the room again. So, I'm not going to say, because I don't know this to be 100% accurate, but I think that myself and the Blaze team have probably spent more collective hours in the CCTV video room than any other group or team or individual journalists up to this point. We've managed to get in there for several weeks with a full crew and actually have all three terminals to ourselves for extended periods of time. So I would like to say that we have looked at and seen and gotten everything that we could get that's important, but that's not even possible with the access that we have been afforded because there's just so much. I mean, 41,000 hours. I think somebody did the math a long time ago. It would take one person sitting nonstop 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It would take them over 5 years to view all of that video. So it's a daunting task. And now they have, I don't remember the exact count of that 41,000 hours of January 6th footage. They have roughly 25 or 30,000 now uploaded to Rumble. It's a little wieldy. It's a little unmanageable. It's much easier to view and access because the software that the Capitol Police had, the proprietary software, it's really manageable. It's really robust. You can have multiple screens up or multiple cameras up at the same time on the screens there at their terminals and sync them all. So if you can have six cameras and be looking at six different videos all running at the same time, which makes it very easy if you're trying to track somebody as they're moving through the Capitol. You see them go down one hall or down a staircase or darting into another room or through a passageway, and all of a sudden you see them appear on the other camera. You don't have to hunt and peck, whereas on the Rumble it's much more unwieldy because you can only look at one at a time, unless you want to download all of that video they have up and put your own put it onto your own viewing system or your own software editing system. But it is great that they have released as much as they have, and I'll certainly take any questions on that later that people want to talk. People that really kind of want to know the inner workings of that. I'll be glad to answer. There's nothing. I certainly won't reveal anything that is secret or classified or that the committee doesn't want us to reveal. But there's very, very little of that. It's pretty accessible information, and I'd have no problem answering questions about that later.
Yeah, no, and Steve, I appreciate it. And one of the things that I've recommended people to do, because I do point them to the Rumble channel, obviously your reporting and all the reporting that came out of the Blaze and many other different organizations that I think that had done great work that had access to it. I think that I would point to all of their reporting. But for somebody that's maybe has like a sleuth vein in their body and they want to go and they want to pick apart the recordings, if they go to the Rumble channel, you could actually put on, it was either Glenn Beck or somebody at the Blaze put together a timeline. I know Tucker put together a timeline, but that's like 2 hours long. There's a
Yeah.
couple of organizations that put together timelines. You can overlay those timelines onto the footage that you're seeing, and you can probably navigate it a little bit, but that's going to take a little bit more work than the access you had to a system like that. But the purpose of the space, Steve, I just wanted to introduce you as well, so people, if they didn't have your background, which I do, and I appreciate your time, was the Trump assassinations and the revelations that you've come out with in the last 24 hours. I think they're highly impactful. I think that we should be talking about them. And I think that they're very specific in the details versus just, some kind of like rough, how I usually describe it, like bumper bowling, where the gutters aren't there, kind of like
Right.
soft, easy reporting on things so it's easily digestible. But what you had come out with was very more specific. And I think that raises more questions. But I know Aaron was excited to set this up with you. My name, obviously, if you don't remember, my name is Aaron also. So there's two
Yeah.
Aarons here. But I think Aaron set this up. So I think if Aaron, if you want to lead us down into this and kind of get into the story a little bit, I would appreciate it. But thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Trash. And this is why I asked you to host a space, because that's how we get more viewers. Because I don't care for follows or whatever likes. I don't care for that. I just want this story to get out there. So a lot of the time I organize these kinds of things behind the scenes. Doesn't matter. The point is, I'm glad that this actually worked out. So thank you, Steve. I want to first start out with a few thank yous. First of all, thank you, Steve, because this kinds of format is not what you're used to. You're more used to a sit down with a actual real interview. This is a different format, and yet you still decided to take part of this. So thank you for this. Everybody should understand that this is not what you're used to. So
Right.
it deserves a lot of credit for that. That's the first thing I would like to say. Second thing, I would also like to give a shout out to American Mission because they canceled their Twitter space and they came over here with all the followers and all the accounts here, so they're boosting our numbers. So shout out for American Mission for helping us out with views. So let's get into this. You, Steve, have been first above all else. If you guys don't know who Steve is, for anybody new who's joining in, you've never heard about this guy. I just want to give you understanding. You want to know if you're talking to the right person about what the deep state is up to. You want to know who is a threat to the deep state. Look at who they're trying to kill or arrest. And Steve is one of those persons who they've actually arrested, put into shackles because I don't know. I have no idea. Even I don't think even certain murderers don't get put into shackles. But Steve, for some reason, is so dangerous. He's a threat or whatever, trying to escape the country or something. So no, he needs to be put into shackles. We'll go through fast that because a lot of most people probably know this already. So we'll go through that just very quickly. So Steve has been put into shackles, arrested. Why? Because he was on the Capitol reporting. You were an independent reporter at the time, not working for Blaze. Now you have joined the Blaze. So you were reporting on what was going on. They were like, no, you can't do this because, I don't know, you're trying to expose what actually is going on there. If there's anybody I want to be in a riot, I want journalists to be there so they can capture everything, make sure that the public knows this is what actually happened. I don't want to wait for a government narrative to come out and condemn people. I want an actual narrative from real journalists, and that's exactly what you've been doing. Then they tried to say, well, you said certain things in text messages in a hotel or whatever. I'm that's not a crime. It's called freedom of speech. Get used to it. So you're clearly a threat to the establishment, to the deep state, to whatever who is controlling now everything in the government. You're clearly a threat to them. So
Apparently so.
let me
Yes.
get into the actual subject matter here. The first question I want people to actually comprehend what's going on here and the threat that you pose and your reporting poses to the pre-existing narrative. As I think Dan Bongino says, that the greatest threat to a politician is the debunking of a pre-existing narrative. That is the most dangerous thing. Like they put out, this is what's going on, and then somebody else comes, actually this is what's going on. That's like the greatest threat. So you've been doing a lot of that. What would happen if if Harris wins this time around? What would happen to you? What dangers do you find yourself in?
Well, I think that if there is a Harris victory in November, things are going to go very badly for me in my
Steve, can
own
you hear me?
case. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear Steve just fine, Aaron.
Okay.
If
Oh,
you if you
okay.
close
I'll
out,
drop
Aaron,
down
come
and I'll
back in.
come back
Yep,
up.
yep. So Steve, go ahead. Sorry, it's just spaces
Yeah,
glitches. Yeah,
yeah.
sorry about that.
I was just saying that I am very concerned for my own personal situation if there is in fact a Harris victory, because if that happens, things could go very poorly for me, and I think also it will go very badly for others who have certainly maybe done a few things. We'll just say worse than I did that day. You know, I'm charged with four misdemeanors, the four basic misdemeanors that all of the accidental tourists, I like to call them, or those who committed the vile terroristic act of trespassing. That's why I call myself a misdemeanor terrorist. It is because that's the way I've been treated by the federal government for going into a restricted space with a camera and a microphone. And but there were, we have now in our I think we're up to about 80 right now that journalists who we've identified who entered from the outside into a restricted space. This includes freelancers, it includes independents, it includes bloggers, podcasters, independent photojournalists, people that are not assigned or were working for any media company whatsoever. And that was just exactly my situation and my status on January 6th. And and of course, that also includes some mainstream media people. That includes some big media people from the LA Times to the New Yorker. And so there are plenty of examples of all types of media people and individuals who entered into a restricted space. Now, what most people don't know is that just because you work for a media company or even if you have a press pass, which, by the way, not everybody that went in had their press badge on them or displayed it or even had one. They certainly didn't have a congressional press badge. But the one thing in the law that is true, whether we're talking about federal law or state law, is that no journalist, regardless of who they work for, regardless of status, and no matter if they have 10 different press badges hanging from a lanyard around their neck, they are not allowed to enter a restricted space without the express permission of law enforcement. And we have no evidence right now of any of these other 60, 80, maybe by the time we finish our research, up to 100 journalists who entered that restricted space that they got permission from law enforcement before they crossed the restricted territory. Now, my naysayers, the people who like attacking me, and I have as many trolls on my X account as anybody else. Have a couple of favorites. I don't block them. I let them have their say, and they like pointing out the fact that I said some things before I got to a restricted space and after I left the restricted space that they don't like. For instance, I called Nancy Pelosi a bitch in my hotel room that night on a YouTube video that I uploaded with a colleague of mine that I attended January 6th with, and we were yucking it up, and we were having adult beverages, and we had just seen on the news that night that there was a accusation that somebody had allegedly stolen Nancy Pelosi's laptop. This was about 8 o'clock that evening on January 6th in my hotel room in Virginia. By the way, I was not in a restricted space, and so we were with adult beverages in our hands, and the news of this coming across the television. I made a joke, and it was clearly a joke because we were laughing about it. And I said, "Well, my only regret today is I wish I had stolen Nancy Pelosi's laptop. Can you imagine what I would have learned about the government if I had access to that?" Now, clearly a joke, clearly yucking it up with a colleague and a close friend. And that was actually used against me by the FBI in my statement of facts as they were putting together the rationalization for pressing charges against me. Now, I had a colleague from, I'm not going to name him on this call, but a colleague from a mainstream media company who on his X page he posted a video of me. I thought, or it may have been the day that I actually got arrested back on March the 1st. And he posted and he said, if Steve Baker had not said what he said before he got to the Capitol and after he left the Capitol, it's highly likely he would have never been charged by the Department of Justice. So, what does that tell you? That tells you that I have been selectively prosecuted or being selectively prosecuted for my speech and for my views about what happened that day, as opposed to other journalists who submitted their stories, their videos, their work, their ideas, their perceptions of the day to more favorable media or took more favorable positions that comported with the regime's narrative. And that's the difference. And that's why that they pulled me out of the crowd. And I'm not the only one. I've documented and done stories on a couple of the other independent journalists who have been treated just as unfairly as I have been, legitimate journalists doing legitimate work who have also been prosecuted through this process. But the one thing that is missing in all of these journalists that have been prosecuted and who have not been is all of those who have not been prosecuted, all I'm gonna pull that back. Almost all of them have submitted their stories, their videos, their work, their opinions to left wing media sources.
No, that's 100% correct. And one of the things I remember, Steve, I remember this. You said, I think you said it was March. Man, it feels like it's been longer than that. These last 4 years or 3.5 years has just been insane. Well, the last 8 years have been absolutely crazy. But
Hmm.
one of the things I remember was that you weren't arrested, like you weren't pulled out of your home. You had to
No.
surrender. right? So you were being driven down, and they told you to wear minimal clothing, and they were going to perp walk you, and they were going to put leg chains and wrist chains and waist chains on you, and they were going to perp walk you, but you had to wear minimal clothing,
Yep.
and you showed up in a suit. And they still bent you over the hood and tried to make a spectacle out of it, because it was not that you were persona non grata. It was that you represented a perp walk that they wanted to show to people at that time for propagandized purposes. And they told you not to wear a suit. They told you to wear minimal clothing. They told you to do all these things, and you wore a suit. I'll never forget that, because it was hilarious to me, because it was the spirit of everything that we're angry about. It's like you are corrupting what it means to be an American. And so I love the fact that you wore that suit. Can you tell that quick story? I know we're getting into January 6th
Yeah.
stuff here. It's good background, but I think the substance of the space is your revelations and the inside tip that you got. But tell that story, because it's my favorite. It's like my favorite.
Yeah, we have it in writing. The assistant U.S. attorney in charge of my case sent my lead attorney an email the day before the arrest, or the day before I self-presented, because as you said, they did not come knock my door down. They didn't show up with 15 armed agents and put the red dots on my chest and my forehead, like so many others, unfortunately, have been subjected to, including misdemeanor charged journalists who have been put through that. They did not do that to me. It took them over 3 years to finally figure out a way to charge me, and finally come to the conclusion that it was worth the effort and worth the PR black eye that they were going to take. And I hope we've given them one. But nevertheless, we got an email the day before instructing my attorney to tell me that I needed to arrive at 7 a.m. at the Dallas field office of the FBI wearing shorts, a t shirt, and flip flops. Well, that told me right then that they were going to put me in the orange jumpsuit, because that would be easier to change into, and that they were going to slap the leg chains on me. So I made the determination right then that if they were going to do that, they were going to have to take my suit and tie and off of me in order to do that. So I showed up. I showed up not only in a jacket, tie, dress slacks, nice shirt, dress shoes, but I also showed up with a one of the FBI whistleblower suspendable pins on my lapel. Since I was going to be presenting myself to the FBI, I thought I would poke them one step further by wearing that symbol of defiance against the FBI. So that's what happened. So I arrived at 7 o'clock that morning. I had two of my attorneys were there with me. They walked over to the FBI agents. They negotiated with them that I would not be put into a orange jumpsuit, but I had to take off my jacket, my necktie, my belt, and I had to take the shoelaces out of my shoes. But they would allow me to remain in my own shirt, my own slacks, and my shoes without the shoelaces. And so that's how I went in. That's how I presented myself to the FBI. They processed me, obviously did the whole search, and then they put me in cuffs. Where they then took me to the car, to one of their vehicles, and then they transferred me from the FBI field office to the federal courthouse in downtown Dallas, where they handed me over to the U.S. Marshals, who then put me in the leg chains, the belly chains, cuffed my wrist to my belly, and then put me in a cage with a meth dealer. So that's how I spent the next 5 hours.
Absolutely ludicrous. It it would be. I mean, that is the kind of behavior or way of behaving towards somebody who I would suspect is being either a murderer, a terrorist, something like that. That would make sense to me. But somebody who is reporting on, hey, this is what actually is going on. It's absolutely ludicrous. And again, I want to reiterate this one more time. I want to echo what Trash just said. That I love the story that they're telling you, hey, you're going to walk into court and you're going to be dressed as a slob because that's all that you are, and we're going to dehumanize you. You're going to wear flip flops like some kind of schmuck, and you're going to do whatever we want. And you're like, no, I'm a human being. You're going to treat me as such, or I'm not going to allow you to dehumanize me in such a way. And this is the spirit that I really love hearing, that we are done. We are done with this kind of behavior. We're done with them treating us like this. You are going to treat us as human beings, and we're going to make the best of a terrible situation. This is why I freaking love this story. Trash love this story. I'm sure the audience loved this story. So I want to touch on something though that you said, which is another ludicrous and absolutely astoundingly stupid thing, and an attack on freedom of speech, where you were talking with your guys and said, "Oh, imagine if we should have been the ones who stole Nancy Pelosi's laptop." Okay, here's my problem with that. That is not advocating for stealing Nancy Pelosi's laptop. That is not saying that you're going to. That is not doing any incitement or anything like that. That's like, hypothetically speaking, it would have been so awesome if we could have just find out all these crazy secrets and just publish them, because this is how journalists think, guys. It's not that crazy to think that a journalist would want to get his hands on more information. I mean, this is literally your job. So the most ludicrous the most ludicrous thing here, an absolute attack on freedom of speech, is where they say, no, you can't even speak in hypotheticals. You can't even speak in such a way that you're not advocating for it. You're not calling for it. You're just being like, just imagine if we actually found out the truth about things. And they're like, no, you can't even think about trying to bring down any powerful politicians. You can't even think about it. Don't even think about it. This is thought crime.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the opening to a thought crime. What do you think about this?
Well, that's exactly what it is. And as I said, anybody who has seen the video in its context knows that we were yucking it up and we were joking at the time. But you're exactly right. But that was the purpose of the FBI in their statement of facts as it was prepared for the Department of Justice, was to take those statements that I had said before and after, include those, because then they are creating what they call a state of mind. So they want to present to the government that I had a specific state of mind at the time, which then compelled me to, quote unquote, join the mob. Of course, I never joined the mob. Anybody who has seen the published 37 minutes of me in the Capitol, we have all of it. We've got a compilation video that the Blaze put together through my efforts and my team's efforts of harvesting all of the CCTV, overlaid and compiled with some of my own video from my own camera that day. And we have it all published, and they will see that I never joined the mob, that I never participated, I never chanted, I never sang songs, I never waved a flag. I was wearing no political messaging or attire at all. I entered the Capitol. I did not give anybody a high five. I performed my job professionally. I spent most of my time getting up and away from the other people so that I could video what they were doing. And then at times you can see me on camera stop, take a moment, put my backpack down, which had my tripod and my microphone and my man on the street interview equipment, which I was planning on doing that day and never did. And I put the backpack down and then started taking notes and into my phone. And so that, all of that video evidence is there. It's irrefutable. But I don't want to spend this whole call talking about January 6th or my experience there. I think probably most of the people in here are at least somewhat familiar with that. But I will address the handful of people that are likely on this call that are some of those trolls that follow me. There may be a couple of sedition hunters on here. There are people. I've got some haters. I've got some haters from quote unquote our side as well. And so I'll just address them in this way. There are people likely on this call, maybe even a couple of my favorite FBI agents, who would like to see me being waterboarded in Guantanamo for the rest of my life daily. And believe me, people have posted that in my timeline and on my social media. But there are people that regularly, daily come into my social media feeds and criticize me and bring up those scary words that I said, that I called Nancy Pelosi a bitch, or that one of the things they love pointing out is that when Ashley Babbitt was shot, suddenly every cop in the area of the Capitol where I was drew their weapons because their radios falsely reported, because Lieutenant Michael Byrd went on his radio and proclaimed to every single cop that was monitoring their radio that he was taking fire. or that they were taking fire, which was a lie. That was the first thing he reported after he shot the unarmed Ashley Babbitt. So now every cop in the building thinks they are taking fire, and they all draw their weapons. And to that, I asked, no, this is the first time I saw drawn weapons all day long. And to that, I asked the policemen who were there, are you planning on using those guns on us? And I have people that claim that I was heckling the cops that day, as did the FBI, of course. And that's not what happened. I was again doing my job. What is my safety situation right now where I'm at? Are you planning on using that gun on us? And so, if anybody that has followed these trials whatsoever know that the government creates a narrative in every single case that is far, far and away over exaggerated from what the truth actually is or what the actual context is. Now, did I enter a restricted space that day? Yes, I did. Is that a crime to enter a restricted space without receiving the permission of law enforcement? Yes, it is. Then they need to charge all 60, 80, or 100 other journalists who entered a restricted space that day without permission from law enforcement, or they need to dismiss my case. They need to forgive and pardon and expunge the record of J.D. Rivera, Stephen Horn, and a couple of others as well.
No,
Although,
they need to, Steve. And so like so here's a funny, not a funny, it's funny in a dark sense of we've all lived through like this tyranny and like everything that we're dealing with. But it's funny into the effect of you pissed off the FBI, you pissed off the Capitol Police, you pissed off the Biden administration, and you pissed off the mainstream leftist media. Now you've pissed off the Secret Service because now you're actually illuminating uh, through your story that you came out with 20 hours ago on the Blaze Nightly News about what went down not only in Butler, Pennsylvania, but also what happened on the golf course in Doral. And I think that that's the meat and potatoes of this conversation. So, do you want to kind of set the stage for people here so people can kind of make this transition? Because now you've got Ron Rowe, who failed upwards like usual, and many other people inside the Secret Service now pissed at you as well because you're receiving inside tips. Like Dan Bongino seems to be persona non grata with the Secret Service, but you seem to be number two at this point. So now you pissed off them as well.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of making a career at pissing off the various federal law enforcement agencies, not on purpose. It's based upon what they're doing and their failure to be upfront, their failure to be honest, their failure to be transparent about both their own mistakes, their inconsistencies, and their own cover-ups. And let's be honest, you always go to government incompetency first, and then the next thing you see from these agencies is that they start the process of covering up. So when they start covering up, then they launch all of the conspiracy theories. It's their fault. If they would just be transparent about their failures, because they are, and I always say this about the federal government. We are talking about the security forces, whether we're talking about the Capitol Police, whose responsibility it is to the safety of the House of Representatives and the Senate members, or we're talking about the Secret Service, whose responsibility it is for presidential candidates, the president, former presidents, vice presidents, et cetera, et cetera. We're talking about the largest government in the world. So we're probably also talking about ultimately the most incompetent government in the world as well, just by the numbers, just by an order of magnitude. And they seem to be becoming more incompetent of late. And we can, I don't really want to get into those issues here, whether it's DEI or lowering of hiring standards, or whatever the case may be. We don't need to go off on that tangent. Everybody knows that that's true. But the bottom line is that in the case of the two assassination attempts, and by the way, I'll just tell everybody right now, I wish to God people would stop trying to shoot Trump, because I don't want to cover this. I have other projects that my stack of stuff that I'm most interested in, and the stuff that I've been developing, some of it for 3.5 years, and I can't wait to finally get it to press or get it to video so that I can release it, is being interrupted by these yahoos that keep trying to take Trump out. I wish they'd stop for a lot of reasons, but I think everybody gets my point there. Uh, but once we were assigned, and when I say we, myself and Joe Hanneman, who's now with us at the Blaze, once our editor in chief assigned he and I to the first assassination attempt, obviously I've had to monitor and I've had to be as tuned in to all of the revelations, all of the Senate and House hearings, the task force hearing today that took place in Congress. I had to have that going in the background. I had to be monitoring that. Uh, I've got to be reading all of these documents that was released, like yesterday by the Senate, which is 134 pages that I had to go through. It's my responsibility. I have to go through that. So, other than the things that we learned by and through our own sources, because fortunately, Joe and I had a couple of sources on the ground. We had a couple of eyeballs in Butler. We had no eyeballs in Florida for that attempt, but in Butler we did. And so through our own sources and because of our attentiveness to what's going on, we've been able to highlight some things. So I'm not going to say that I released a bombshell yesterday about this, but I by going through that 134 pages of the senatorial review, I was able to find something that I thought was highly, and disturbingly embarrassing, and I called it on Blaze News tonight. I said it's either just the height of incompetence or they just don't care, and I think you're setting me up. Or correct me if I'm wrong. Are you talking about my
Yeah,
story about
yeah. So
the drones, the drone
yeah,
counter
so like
drones?
I'm setting up your drone story, number one, but
Yeah.
number two, like I'm on the fence as well, Steve. Like I actually want to put this into the public ether. I'm not convinced completely that there's some like kind of like orchestrated plot inside our governmental agencies. I think it's a failure of incompetency and other factors, and they basically just don't care, and therefore they're culpable because they don't care. But I'm not suggesting this that there's some kind of like high level orchestrated plot, because as you pointed out, and this is my own opinion, I'm not speaking for you or anybody else in the space, but from what I can tell from government, and I go after government corruption. My lane is the censorship industrial complex. My lane is lawfare. Like that's my lane. Like that's where I
Hmm.
spend most of my time. It's evident to me that incompetence and gross incompetence, the larger that the government builds itself, the more incompetent it becomes. And it only takes one or two people inside a network of incompetence to actually affect real change, where you have an open rooftop, or you have a known media Bush spot where you can get clips of the former president, and you can exist there, and that those vulnerabilities are also known by the Secret Service, and like a simple tertiary, floating of a drone with IR imagery equipment attached to it would have picked this up because the guy was there 12 hours ago. But what you were talking about in that reporting on Blaze News tonight, I think is the meat and potatoes of where we're at in this space tonight. And I think that a lot of people need to hear what you're talking about, because it was very prescient. You're very spot on, and you seem to also have sourcing to back up that story. And I think that's important to talk about, because I want to talk about receipts. I don't want to talk about conjecture. And I
Right.
think that you have the receipts, Steve. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll before I get into the actual story that we're referencing, I will set this up a little bit further by talking about the difference between the incompetence, the gross incompetence, the just near lackadaisical I don't care, and then all the way to the conspiracy theories. Just before we went on the air tonight, I had somebody that posted on our feed that if I wanted to be on the right side of history, I would agree to the fact that there were multiple shooters shooting at Trump in Butler. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that based on the evidence and based on the
Nope.
research that I've done and based on the actual boots on the ground sourcing that we had that day, which we can talk about later on. But there are reasons, as I said earlier, why conspiracy theories are easily hatched, and the worst perpetrator of all are the government agencies who won't just come forward with the facts and won't answer questions when they're called before Congress. They are the biggest sources and the reason why these conspiracy theories proliferate, just because they're trying to cover their own ass, even if it is just incompetence. They start the cover up of that, and then that launches into the conspiracy conjecturing. But having said that, there's also a middle ground in there, and that's the possibility that it is purposeful incompetence. Because if you can be incompetent to the point to where you allow, and look, they don't they don't have to have, and when I say they, the Secret Service, the FBI, any of the other investigative agencies, they don't have to have real time identifiable threats on the ground, knowing of a particular group or an individual, a lone gunman, an Iranian terrorist cell, or a Venezuelan gang. They don't have to have real time intel that is existing and it's somebody from one of those groups or one of those individuals is moving on Trump. They know that Trump is in danger every day of his life. He is the number one target of all the Secret Service protectees. You don't believe it? Who else has had a shot taken at him in the last 10 years? None
No
of them.
one. None of them.
None of them. He's had two in the last 2 months.
And that includes Tim Walz.
That's right. And this is what, you know, when I talk about sourcing, sometimes it's some of the people that we work with closest are people that have the background. We have a couple of our main sources. Their jobs for years is that they train Secret Service sniper teams, Secret Service counter assault teams. They're the people that train them, and they know them very well. And they have provided sourcing directly to the ground in those particular circumstances. And as a result of having people of that that quality and that expertise, we tend to learn a lot more about where those failures were. And one of the things that they have taught me, not something I learned in school, but one of the things that they have taught me is there's this thing called a threat matrix that has to be applied to every single one of the Secret Service protectees. And what I mean by that is they believe that Donald Trump, even though he's not the sitting president, he should have the highest security package of any of the Secret Service protectees because of the threat matrix, because they believe that his threat is at least, the very least, 10 times higher than even President Biden. First of all, it's probably worse than that if you compare it to Biden, because nobody wants to take Biden out. He's taking himself out. He's already out. He's out of the game. He's not president anyway. He is checked out. And so there's nobody wanting to take him out. There's no need to from anybody, any hostile of any kind. And certainly nobody's willing or wanting to take Jimmy Carter out. Jimmy Carter is in hospice. He is on his way out. Nobody is threatening him. And yet they continue to fail as it relates to former President Trump. And this is where we go to the heart of the story now. Let me just give you an example. This is what I reported on yesterday. And this was taken directly from the Senate document that was released yesterday morning, the 134 page document I was referring to. And this report revealed that on the morning of the Butler rally, that the counter, and I'm not going to use the fancier phrasing because I like to keep it simple for everyone. There's such a thing as a counter drone technology. And the guy in charge of the counter drone technology, and by the way, drones themselves are the things right now that security businesses, security forces, the people that have protectees, VIPs of all types all over the world, drones are what they fear the most right now, especially in these outdoor rally situations. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch some of these Ukrainian battlefield situations with drone attacks. That could happen to a former president or our current president standing on a stage in an outdoor rally.
Without a counter drone presence. Meaning,
without a counter drone
yeah.
presence. That's correct. Successful counter drone presence. So in Butler, they sent out their counter drone specialist who, as we learned from the report, only had 3 months of experience, period, with the technology that he was in charge of that day. 3 months. That's total training and experience. He arrives at 10:30. He cannot get the counter drone system to work. His first thing that he thinks of is that he's getting some sort of signal interference from all the other things that are taking place. So he moved to a more isolated area and set up shop there. He still could not get the system to work. So he spends the next 4 or 5 hours on the phone. He called 1-800 counter drone help, whatever it's called. I'm joking. So it's whatever he literally called an 800 number to get tech support service. This is the Secret Service specialist in counter drone technology, or the level of incompetent specialist, quote unquote, that the Secret Service decided to provide in the Trump security package that day. He couldn't get it to work. Finally, at about 3:45, if you remember and recall the details of the story, one young Thomas Crooks managed to get his drone up, and he did his recon surveillance with his drone at about 3:45 that afternoon. And because there was no operational counter drone system working, nobody knew that Thomas Crooks, the shooter, had his own drone up doing recon surveillance. Then at about 4:30, they figured out that Mr. Counter Drone Specialist needed an Ethernet cable. He had to go to the audiovisual team, the people running the big giant sound system and all the big screens, and they went over and asked them if they had a spare Ethernet cable in their box of cords and cables. They had one, and lo and behold, he gets his system to work. And about 4:30, he's got it up and running. Of course, by then, Thomas Crooks' drone is back in the box. And Thomas Crooks has already learned what he needed to learn to get over to the HER building. So that's the level of incompetence that we had. And by the way, just so you know, in my briefcase or in my backpack, I have a bag of cables and cords and connectors and adapters that I carry with me. I carry an Ethernet cable with me every day of my life.
So Steve, I started carrying an Ethernet cable in my backpack of USB-C, USB-A, Apple Lightning chargers. I started carrying an Ethernet cable on top of the HDMI and everything else because of this story. I was like, oh fuck, man, I gotta have that cable. I gotta have that cable ready.
Yeah, I carry one with them with the adapters from the Ethernet to USB or USB-C and et cetera, for whatever possibility that I need it for, whatever circumstance I'm in at a hotel or wherever. And so that's just standard operating procedure. But for some reason, the United States Secret Service specialist didn't know enough about his own equipment to be properly equipped himself that day. Now, that's bad enough. Okay, so Butler, that's one of the huge, most horrific failures there. Not only to mention that we had learned from the acting chief of the United States Secret Service in multiple testimonies, and it has been confirmed even today in the hearings today, is that in Butler, the Secret Service did not have their own drones, surveillance drones. And when offered surveillance drones from local law enforcement, from the local sheriff's departments, the Secret Service turned it down. Now, we have since learned that on the periphery, and you can see it in people, they've captured it in their cameras and they add that to their list of conspiracy episodes and curiosities. You can see a couple of drones in some people's cameras, and they're on the outside of the perimeter because local law enforcement put their drones up anyway. They did fly their drones, but the Secret Service turned down the coverage over the event itself in the secured area. Okay, so that's the situation in Butler. You would think, having learned their lesson and having taken such a black eye and such an embarrassment as it relates to drones itself, that they would have been prepared going forward for the next time President Trump was doing something outside.
Well, no, Steve, to that point, like, remember, like, Kimberly Cheadle was like in front of Congress and she had her name placard and she was like trying to explain it away. And then she was able to resign with dignity, whatever it may be. And then Ron Rowe took over on Point Man for the
Mhm.
Secret Service during that hearing in Congress. They were allowed to, like, basically get away with all of this. And then Ron Rowe says, listen, we have a new dichotomy here in the USSS. We believe in being not no longer reactive but proactive, and we are
Right.
going to do X, Y, and Z. And then what happened at Trump Doral was not a deviation from the plan at all. And in response to what happened, and what you just laid out in Butler, like, Steve, this was crazy to me. This was crazy to me.
That's why I say that what happened in Florida is a bigger failure. Now, nobody took a shot at Trump, as far as we know, in Florida, uh, but it was a larger failure without the obvious death and a couple of other injuries. But it was a larger failure from the United States Secret Service because they had already taken the PR hit. They had already taken the black eye. They had already been embarrassed. They had already been castigated by senators and congressmen and by the press in general. And yet, on that day, as far as we know, they had no drones up, which would have been the simplest thing in the world for them. First of all, I don't even yet know whether they had counter drone capabilities there with the president on the golf course. We don't know yet. They have told us that they didn't have drones up that day. And we know beyond any shadow of a doubt, had they had drones up with thermal and infrared technology, that they could have immediately ascertained that there was a guy in the prone position laying on the fence line, as you mentioned earlier, where paparazzi and other photographers have taken photos of the president before, and to not have been sweeping that area to begin with, and not to have already recognized that possibly hours in advance, because he was there 12 hours in advance. We're talking about Ryan Ruth, or Ralph, however you want to say his name. And he wasn't discovered until just minutes before Trump would have been going down that fairway. I believe it was the sixth fairway. And that is inexcusable. There was a couple of other oddities about that situation, which I don't believe happened. I find it very, very hard to believe that a Secret Service agent in a golf cart driving by happened to see a gun barrel, as he or she has reported, and then suddenly jumped off the golf cart and took shots at the direction of the gun barrel. If they were close enough in a heavily wooded, bushy area um, to see an actual gun barrel, a Secret Service agent should have been skilled enough, even with their service weapon, their handgun, to have hit that target. So that's another embarrassment right there.
Let me touch on this. This is what former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino said that when it comes to the Secret Service, they have 3 years ago technology tomorrow, something like that. I think that's one of his sayings, that they use like the very old technology, and I mean it's just
Yeah,
super weird.
he says they do more with less. They do more
Yeah.
with less. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and he has been calling out a lot of the things that's going on, and good on him. And yeah, it probably is the number one, the number one person on the crap list for the for the Secret Service for calling them out. You're probably, and Trash, you're probably right about Steve, that he is probably number two for also calling out the crap where it needs to be called out. But I everything that you're explaining right now here, this only confirms my biases about the Secret Service, that this was planned. Now, I want to make sure that people understand. I'm just conspiratorializing here, okay? I'm not bought into, like, this is literally what happened or definitely what happened. But we're allowed to have some theories, and I dare the establishment to debunk my theories. Please debunk it, so I don't have to think this way. I know conspiracy theories become so terrible. I'm like, we're allowed to talk about these things. We're allowed to theorize. It's your job to debunk them. And if you're unable to, well, you're just confirming everything. And so when you have people like Kim Cheadle, I'm like, well, was this part of the plan to assassinate Donald Trump? This happened 2 times, and I believe that it was a plan to assassinate Donald Trump, and not just assassinate him. They could have just killed him in his sleep, and nobody would have been the wiser. I mean, except for us, but nobody would have been the wiser. Oh well, these kinds of things happen. He food poisoning or whatever. But I believe that they wanted to kill him in 4K in front of everybody, so everybody knows we're going to kill your president. You can't do anything about it. Now, this is what I'm putting out there. Why? Because I think now you might say, well, what it was. I would say that it is actually just it's just incompetence. I'm like, no, the incompetence is part of the equation. That they would staff people who are shorter than Trump, such as those women who, like the Three Stooges, they were trying to put in their gun, pull out their gun. They have no idea. You have other woman who was hiding behind, I don't know, whatever. And so you have people who are smaller than Trump. You have all kinds of crazy failures, such as the shooter being disguised, not really disguised, but wearing more or less the same attire that local law enforcement were wearing. So he blended in with the crowd. They were supposed to be a sniper team on the other roof, but there were none. Why? Because it was a slanted roof, but on the other side you have other guys on the roof. Well, not much of an answer there from Kim Cheadle, and she didn't even feel like she needs to resign or anything. She didn't feel it was appropriate for her to resign. So when you have all these things, I'm like, okay, so it seems as though the incompetence is part of the equation. If you're going to try to assassinate the president, you would staff his staff and his security with people who are highly incompetent. You would put in people who cannot defend him, who are shorter than him, make it everything ever so easier for an assassination attempt. Now, I've thrown out a lot of things. I've been conspiratorializing right here a lot, right? But the same as you do with Sarah Gonzalez when she puts out the conspiracy theory on the show, you bring her back to reality. You pull back the rope. Okay, calm down. Let's go. Let's take a step back. Here's what actually is going on. Let's not jump to conclusions. Do the same thing here, because I've thrown out a whole bunch of things. Tell me if anything what I'm saying here is wrong, or if I am jumping the gun here.
Well, I'll just say this because it's pretty easy. I think that in both cases, it can be chalked up to gross incompetence, but also it can be chalked up to, as I said on Blaze News Tonight last night, I said, or they just don't care, which leads us to the possibility that, as I said earlier, this is the point that I was making earlier, is that Trump is under constant threat without known specific threats, and leaving by purposeful incompetence vulnerabilities open means that they're leaving him open to the possibility of attack. Now, that is a possibility, and it's also a conspiracy theory, but it's a middle road one. I mean, I don't buy into the fact that in Butler there was 3 or 4 shooters, in different trees and water tower and
me
water
neither.
towers.
Me
Yeah.
neither.
No.
I don't think it's. I don't think that it is
I don't believe
necessary to believe that is part of the narrative. I think the narrative is more or less, the establishment narrative is more or less true, but that does not contradict anything that I'm saying. That, well,
No,
you still tried to kill the president.
But
no, but
I will give everyone tonight. I will give you my conspiracy theory. Why not? Right? Because I'm
all right.
open to
I want to
one.
hear this. I want to hear this,
I
Steve. I want to hear
I
it.
am
I want to hear it. Let's go.
I am open to a very specific conspiracy related to both Butler and the Florida incident, but not connected. I don't believe that the 2 incidents were connected, except for one possibility, is that every single one of the intelligence community sources that we have, and I'm not talking about one guy, one nutcase that retired from the CIA, 15 years ago. I'm talking about an entire bevy of sources, not only American, not only from the Department of Defense, not only from our other intelligence services, but also from foreign intelligence services. All recognize in both incidences what they see their own handiwork. Now, what do I mean by that? Overseas, both in our very highly elite special operations forces, as well as CIA and a couple of other agencies, we have people that are very, very skilled, very trained in what they call grooming disaffected young men as potential weapons whenever needed, whenever they need to activate them in a circumstance. It doesn't mean that they're being groomed for a specific operation, but as I've been told, and as I've been shared with by multiple sources, that what we do, whether we're in a conflict or a potential coming conflict in the Middle East, in Africa, Asia, Central America, South America, wherever the hot spots are, or where the hot spots are growing, that our IC, our intelligence community, grooms disaffected, lonely young men that can be activated as potential resources or assets when needed if a potentiality arises. In the case of, let's just say, and this is all I'm saying is that this is a possibility. I am not saying that I have.
Oh no, it's happening.
Well, I'll get there. I'm not saying that I have absolute 100% evidence that this took place. All I'm saying is that all of the signs are there that Thomas Crooks had been groomed, and it just so happened 2 weeks, 30 days, whatever it was, in advance of the Trump rally, it was announced that Trump was about to be in his backyard, literally, and that he was activated. Or that he self-activated because of his grooming. The second possibility down in Florida is that we had an individual equally disaffected, equally shunned, who had already been very active by virtue of his activities in Ukraine, recruiting people himself. The fact that the guy had over 100 or over 7 or he had 74 arrests in his career criminal history, over right at 100 charges brought against him, many felonies, and had somehow not only those felonies. I don't know that everybody on this call realizes that in the period of 5 or 6 months in 2002, before Ryan Ruth had his standoff, his 3-hour standoff, allegedly with a machine gun, where he held off the Greensboro, North Carolina Police Department and the Guilford County, North Carolina Sheriff's Department for 3 hours. I don't know that everybody has seen the story that we've done on this. This is another revelation that we put out there. Again, we didn't find it. This was found by other sources, but we were able to amplify this, is that Ralph or Ruth had been arrested 5 or 6 months before that incident. He was found to be in possession of multiple explosive devices. And yet somehow, the danger that a person could be for building his own explosive devices, he had been released on his own recognizance. He was on probation. While on probation for a charge of having in his possession explosives, he now holds off 2 law enforcement departments with a machine gun. You know how many days in prison he got for that? 0. So the sheriff, the then sheriff of Guilford County, told me in an interview, we published the entire content of the interview on theblaze.com. He told me in the interview, I asked him, I said, how is it possible that a guy gets 74 arrests and 100 charges over his career, going all the way back to when he was a teenager, multiple felony convictions, and he's never served any time in prison? And he said to me, he said, well, he said, the guy's probably just crazy, and the courts have decided that there's just no reason to put him through the process, because what's going to happen is a judge or a jury is just going to rule that he is guilty by reason of insanity, and they're just going to slap him on the wrist and put him out on the street anyway. So rather than go through the process, that's just what they did. And they didn't bother to put him through the process, and they kept releasing him. But then the sheriff said to me, but he's exactly the kind of guy that the CIA likes to recruit. That's his quote, not mine.
Absolutely
Yes.
extraordinary. That is, I mean, it is extraordinary. I want to make sure for our viewers that I post, for those who want to look into that, I posted the link to the Blaze on what you described right now. And you also asked, was it Soros money used against you and other conservative sheriffs? And that is in regards to the allowing him to be released because of the liberal judges. And Barnes, the sheriff, said, no doubt about it. So you have also George Soros inserting his disgusting fingers into our political realm again, as he's done so many times.
Yeah.
What you're describing right now, and Trash, and I'll go to you in a moment. What you're describing right now, Steve, is something that exactly what I've talked, and this is exactly what plays into, again, the conspiracy. I just want to make sure people understand. I'm not putting out a narrative as is. This is what happened. Objectively speaking, this is what I believe happened, and it's a conspiracy theory. I want to acknowledge it's a theory. Okay, everybody. I'm not. People think, oh, you must be crazy. No, I understand the theory.
Yeah.
So here's the theory. Here's what I'm thinking. That everything that you described plays very well into what I'm trying to say, that this is exactly what they tried to do. Tried to assassinate the president by recruiting these disillusioned, crazy or mentally struggling young men, or in the latest shooter, and he's a little older, but trying to recruit such people through an MK Ultra program, again, mind control program. That's what MK Ultra stands for. So through a mind control program of a constant, incessant talk about Trump is Hitler, Trump is this, he's going to destroy democracy, he's going to do this, that, and the other. So dangerous, so terrible that people get a little bit more than just Trump derangement syndrome. They get a little violent through that. So again, this plays into when the CIA or whatever wants to activate that person, they would do so however they want, through that MK Ultra and through a media apparatus which constantly reinforces that. So everything that they see matches up with what the CIA or FBI or whoever is making sure that these people get radicalized or become extreme. So everything matches up, then they become violent, and when the apparatus wants them to act, they act. So again, this is a theory. Again, theory that I'm putting out there, but which I believe, nonetheless. This is why we have Steve here, just to reel in. If we get a little too off the
Yeah.
rocker, we are here just to make sure that people understand. We're not
Well,
gonna go off the deep end.
and that's what I want to very succinctly clarify to everyone who has just heard that possibility that I put forth, is that I have no evidence, either through sourcing or otherwise, that either one of these men were groomed for their operations or for what their activities or their actions that they took part in. I have no proof of that whatsoever. Let's just state that clearly. But our sourcing, who are trained, highly trained, decades and decades and decades cumulatively of experience in the intelligence community, have each one, without exception, said that they recognize their own handiwork in various components and background issues as it relates to both of these men. So that's it. So that's the extent of that. I don't know where you guys are right now in terms of where you want to go with this at this time. I don't know if you want to open it up to questions. I'm certainly
Yes.
willing to dive into that at this point. Now, I will. I think I'll just say this, and I'll let Trash and Aaron, I'll allow you guys to adjudicate this. But one of the reasons why I don't like doing spaces is typically when it becomes question time, it becomes chaos. and the other thing that happens that I really hate is people want to make speeches instead of asking questions. You know what I mean? And so they want to advance their theories instead of asking a question.
Right.
So what I'm asking here is that if you want to hear my answers to a question, ask the question. But if you want to make a speech, go do your own space. Fair enough?
Yes. Yes, exactly. Josh, I will allow you to speak just in a moment. I want to make sure that that people understand. If you are going to start with you're going to make a statement or whatever, then you're going to be kicked off the questions. You cannot can't speak unless you're called upon. And keep your question. If you're nervous, it's fine. You could be nervous. Ask the question. Take your time, but ask a freaking question. Do not start with a
Yeah.
speech. Okay, go ahead, Trash.
And I
You're going to
see,
start
and I
with
see, and I
kicking
see,
people off.
I see, and by the way, I'm not opposed to taking, as long as everybody's polite and cordial and we're friendly on these. I see some of my sedition hunter buddies on here, and I'm willing to take questions from anybody at this time, as long as everybody's polite and cordial. I don't care what the intensity of your question is. I'll answer the question.
No, I think that's a fair point. Like, a lot of people hate me, Steve, because I launch them off a space or like I block them or whatever. Because I'm like, you're not adding any kind of value to the conversation. Like, we are trying to create a conversation. You're not adding any value. You're fucking out. But also, like there are some people that are actually going to come up and probably ask the right questions. I think, and I'll do my best at filtering, Steve. So.
Thank you. Well, let's rock. Let's do it.
All right, here we go. Linda, you came up. Warren, I'm going to come to you in a second, but Linda, you came up. You have a question. Linda, Linda Rary, three,
Can you
two,
hear
one.
me?
Yep,
There
we
we
hear
go.
you now.
Okay, I'm gonna back off because I just Steve and I had talked a couple days ago, but I don't really have a question. I was just gonna make a comment, but that's not gonna, you're not open.
I mean, you can make the comment. Like, is it like,
Yes.
are you just,
Be pithy, Linda. That's the key. Pithy.
yeah,
Let's go.
like,
Okay, I was just gonna say, okay, my background, I'm a retired FBI agent, and just a comment about the leadership in the Secret Service and what I see. Um, I just keep thinking Darvo, um, you know, deflect, attack, and reverse the victim, and
yeah,
yeah,
makes sense.
that's
Yeah.
yeah. So I see a lot of narcissism up there, and then I see
Up here or up in the brass?
in the brass.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well,
That
go on.
they get promoted, and then you have the underlings who don't have the spine to stand up to them. So that's kind
Yeah,
of
and
yeah.
thanks, Linda. And that is, and I'll take that as a thing to comment on, and that is true. We are at a time now where all of our primary agencies, whether they're intelligence agencies, security agencies, police, federal law enforcement agencies, whether it's the DoD, they are all political activists now, without exception. The top brass in all of these agencies are political activists. And that's not what any of them should be. They all should be apolitical. None of us individually are apolitical, but there are individuals who are able to do their job in an apolitical way, despite their personal feelings. And that's not what we have at the top upper echelons at any of these agencies today. All right, who's next?
Right. No, like you're not wrong. Like I wasn't gonna like try to chastise you. If you want to talk about like top brass, like what yes, like that's welcomed. Like, what are you talking about? Linda, like you were actually in a space of good company. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
Uh-huh.
No.
Okay.
No, like I don't have a problem with any government or organizations. No, I don't think anybody in the space does. However, if you are going to, like weaponize us against like the top brass, like don't do that. Don't do that. But I don't think you were doing that. Like your comment was valid, actually.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
All right. Well,
Okay.
Linda, thank you, thank you. All right, Helena, J6, Helena, go ahead.
Wait a
And
minute. Wait a
Warren.
minute. Trash. Warren was before. So
Mm.
Either way, I don't care. I mean, I can wait, or the
go
Helena can
go
go.
go
go
ahead, please. Go ahead.
go ahead,
Okay.
Warren.
I actually only have two questions, and actually nice to get to talk to you, Steve. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Big fan, have been. Um, on the Ryan Ralph, do you know if he ever attended any of the schools of higher learning there in the Triangle around Greensboro or up towards Raleigh?
No, not that I'm aware of. I mean, we've looked at his entire arrest record. I mean, he's got arrests going all the way back to when he was in high school, and then he even made the local Greensboro paper as a hero. It was some sort of rescue thing where he rescued some damsel in distress when he was 25 years old, and there was a really nice picture of him in a suit, and he looks like a normal guy back when he was 25. So we've found all of those kind of things, but I'm not familiar, or at least I don't remember what his actual education is.
Yeah. Okay. And then my other one was, well, because the reason why I ask is, I mean, that's right pickings for the 3-letter agencies. But anyway, the other question is, do you know if he has ever spent time in Dorothea Dix?
To my knowledge, no. And of course, I actually still, even though I'm never there, I'm still a resident of Raleigh, North Carolina. So I know what Dorothea Dix is. We can explain to the rest of the country. It's a combination of a detention center and a mental health center as well there in Raleigh. And I have no record. All we see in his arrest records and his legal files going back through the years is just we see suspended sentences, we see probation, we see the word parole, which is an interesting word because we don't know that he was ever paroled from anything. But the one thing that other than the various single nights or whatever that he spent in the tank until he was booted out onto the street again, the one thing that we've been able to determine with pretty fair certainty is that he certainly never did any actual prison time for any of his crimes or convictions.
Okay. And then just a quick comment, for the folks that don't believe that you can actually mind control somebody into pulling the trigger kind of thing, there's actually a hypnotist from over there in Great Britain, a fellow named Darren Brown. And if you'll go and look him up on YouTube, there's actually one on there where he actually hypnotizes this guy over a period of time. But yes, he does hypnotize him, and he pulls the trigger. But anyways, yeah, it is possible. So, anyways, just parting with that, and appreciate y'all letting me have the mic.
Thank you.
All right, Helena, go ahead.
Hi, Trash. Aaron, thank you very much for hosting the space and allowing me to come up and speak. Hi, Steve. We had just seen each other at Jeremy Brown's status hearing. Well, the trial was supposed to start, but you know what's going on with Jeremy Brown. I did want to, at that time, ask you, but it kind of gets hectic at the courthouse, especially when there's so many Jan 6ers there in cases. And, we were all there that day to support Tylene, of course, Jeremy Brown's girlfriend. But I wanted to ask you, just out of great concern for you, what the status is with your case and where are you at right now? What do you think that is going to happen? I know it's kind of a loaded question, but if President Trump doesn't get elected and we can't get him back into the Oval Office and these Jan 6ers pardoned, I know Suzanne had given you a copy of the J6 Pardon Project manual when we were in the cafeteria, but I'm really interested to find out where you are with your case right now. And thank you for allowing me to come up and speak, Aaron.
Yeah, I'll handle both of those here real quickly. The status on my case is that we do have a trial date set. The court has been hesitant to grant us any type of continuance since he originally set the trial date. That begins November 6th is my pretrial hearing. November 12th is the actual beginning of the trial date as it sets right now. So we're talking about a week after the election. We have filed a motion which has been rejected by the court to put that out till after the election, after the first of the year, after the inauguration, in anticipation or hopes that things will change. And that is the status of that situation. But leading up to that, we also have a couple of other motions that have been filed, and because they're motions that have been filed, they're public record. I'll tell you what they are. We have actually requested from the court to take my case away from Judge Cooper on the district court side and bring it down to the magistrate level, which I have a right to do because my charges are only nonviolent misdemeanors. So we don't have to adjudicate this before at the district court level. So we want to bring it down to the magistrate level and take it out of Cooper's hands. Now, Cooper himself can reject that offer or that appeal, but it is our right to do that. We're arguing now with the DOJ about that because the DOJ is saying that is something that we had to do in my very first status hearing, and we have obviously found precedent that shows otherwise. So that response to their rejection of our motion in that regard is in process. And we also have the response to our motion to dismiss based upon selective prosecution. That was filed on Friday. And so we expect to hear from that in a week or two. And then there certainly could be the possibility, because in our response, and this is one of the things that my attorneys have informed me about, is nobody else in the J6 world has been successful in a selective prosecution motion to dismiss, because they really didn't have exact equal and opposite contrasting or comparative examples of the actual examples of selective prosecution. Whereas I actually have them in spades. We have 60, 80, maybe 100 examples of that. And not just based upon what I said before I went into the Capitol and what I said after I left the restricted space, but we also have the comparatives of other journalists on the other side of the political aisle who were just as vocal in their antagonism towards Trump. And so if the court doesn't just dismiss us out of hand and grants our request in the motion for discovery on that, then the government's going to be responsible for turning over all of the discovery we've requested on every single one of those journalists. Not only the journalists who were there that were invited, because the building was full of journalists legitimately there, because they were covering the events of the day going on in the Capitol. Photojournalists, news journalists, media of all type were on scene with invitations, signed in, logged in appropriately and legally there. But there were somewhere between 60 and 100 other journalists who crossed over into a restricted space without permission from law enforcement. And that's just as illegal as my activities that day. So they either culled me out and are selectively prosecuting me, or they're going to have to show why I'm different from those. And that's what we're asking the government to do. So if the judge doesn't reject that out of hand, then that's available. On top of that, the third issue, update on my case, is last week, after all of these months, since May 1st, and this is very late coming, they have offered me a plea deal. And I won't get into the terms of that right now, but they have offered me a plea deal finally, and we're not gonna do anything with that until after we work through our other couple of motions, and then we'll finally make the final determinations of where we want to go with this case. So that's the update there. But there was a second part of your question. What was that? I forgot.
Well, I'm glad's not the word, but thank you for the updates. I will try to get up to the courthouse if your trial proceeds, and I think you did say November 10th, so I'll mark that on my calendar so that I can be there for you. And we really need to start packing these courtrooms And I wish that, members of Congress at the very least would send their staffers, but that's an entirely different conversation. I'm sure you agree with me there.
Yeah.
I just want to know what your thoughts are if President Trump doesn't get elected, because he has promised to pardon, the Jan 6ers, and whether he commutes their sentences, or the pardons actually go through. I know it's going to be a process. What my question was, Steve, what do you think is going to happen if we, futuristically speaking, going forward, if Trump doesn't get elected? I'm kind of in the camp that these arrests are going to continue if we don't do something to stop this. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts about that.
I mean, very, very simply, I think that if Harris Walz wins this election, that it's not going to go well for January 6th defendants. They've already, look, they started ramping up the arrest again this year, and that's been proceeding at pace very regularly. And I think that they will get another, as a result of that, the DOJ will get another infusion of cash, like they did from the omnibus bill last December, which they use those funds to then really kick the arrest back into high gear, because basically the DOJ just ran out of bandwidth. And I mean, that was just an issue of too many people being arrested, too many cases. January 6th is not the only thing that the district court in DC has to deal with, and they just ran out of bandwidth. And both in the Department of Justice with the U.S. attorneys at that level, but also in the court itself. So I think that if they get another infusion of cash, they will ramp that up, and we'll see them try to get that thing on pace to that number that they really want to get to, because they believe that they've identified between 3,000 and 3,500 people that actually entered the Capitol, and they want to make that statement of taking all of those people down. And the statute of limitations runs out in January of 2026. And then there's the possibility, and I hate to even throw this out there because it's rather ominous, but there's a possibility that they could, with a victory, pull some manipulative strategies to extend the statute of limitations if they're in power. And of course, the other thing that we're seeing too is that it's been a mixed bag of success with the ruling by the Supreme Court against the 1512C2 charge. There have been some cases where that's been dismissed right out of hand. We've seen cases where individuals were released from prison as a result of that being dismissed, like John Strand. And then we've seen other cases where they have chosen to kind of revisit it, and then maybe make the sentencing on some of their other charges that were downgraded. They've now gone back in and upgraded them so that the sentencing basically balances out as if the 1512 was still on their, on their conviction record. And so I think that if there is a Harris administration, that we'll see a lot more of the court doing that sort of thing, because they won't have the fear of reprisals against them from a coming Trump administration. And look, I don't mind saying what I'm about to say either, because it's pure honesty. I was a never Trumper in 2016. I was a reluctant supporter. I wasn't a supporter. I reluctantly voted for him in 2020, just simply because I could see the writing on the wall of what a Biden administration meant to us economically. And I was not at January 6th as a Trump supporter, because I wasn't. But I was there as I'm a political libertarian, and I cast what's generally referred to as a vote for the lesser of two or three evils, and that's the way I felt about my vote in 2020. And because of what the Department of Justice has done to me, and because of what the promise that former President Trump has made to pardon, at the very least, all the nonviolent offenders from January 6th, well, I'm a Trump supporter this year, and I don't apologize for it. Thanks, Helena, for your questions. Appreciate it.
Steve, I want to ask you a question now about, and I think this will be a pretty short question because there have been a lot of talk about Iran being responsible and all that. So, you as a reporter, do you see any of that being grounded in reality, or is that just more what I suspect to be more neocon talk? Because we need to ramp up war with Iran, especially since Israel's attacking Hezbollah.
Yeah, I'm fully in that camp right there. I don't think that the United States is in any position to be at war with boots on the ground anywhere right now. I don't think we need to be involved in Ukraine, Israel, Iran. We don't need to be involved in any conflicts. We are in debt, not up to our eyeballs. We are in debt far, 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 far over our heads. And we have problems domestically far, far, far and away that are too important to be worried about what's going on in isolated places around the world. And I think that, and again, that's my libertarianism speaking first and foremost, but I think we need to be concerned with what's going on at home and not overseas right now, except to the extent of anything that specifically threatens U.S. Persons, facilities, interest, whatever. And if that's the case, that's a whole nother calculation at that point.
Well, Steve, nuclear war definitely threatens us all. So I think
Yeah,
ending
well,
these wars. Yeah,
but I
right.
don't,
So I
but
don't
I
escalating.
just,
Yeah, I'm with
I
you.
just
I'm
see
with
that.
you.
That's just,
Go ahead.
I see that as saber rattling. I don't see that as reality right now.
Right. Okay. So Vito, go ahead. Ask your question.
Hey, thank you, Trash. Thank you, Aaron. Welcome back, Trash. Steve, you're a wealth of knowledge. I know you don't like doing spaces, and I'm really happy that you did this tonight. You are a great wealth of knowledge. Aaron started to touch on the question I've been thinking about basically all day. Was really happy to see this scheduled space. Saw a tweet earlier in the day, Ann Vandersteel. Intelligence just in from the southern border, 9 surface-to-air missiles have been smuggled into the U.S. across the New Mexico border. Basically, she also quote tweeted a Donald Trump tweet. And his tweet was saying, hey, there's a lot of threats against me from Iran. These were supposedly supposed to be ground to air missiles to take him down, take his plane down. You're talking about Trump assassins. Both the Butler and the Florida very, very well. I haven't heard anything about this. Was that just maybe a BS tweet, or are there serious threats to Trump from Iran here in our in the U.S.? Kind of a two-pronged question. And thank you again for being here. And thanks for letting me on stage.
Thank you. To the first thing about the surface-to-air missiles, if that is news, I would say, well, duh. I mean, it's not news to me. Not with as porous as our borders have been for the last many years. I mean, there's no God only knows what they have smuggled across. In fact, I think, and I won't get into what I know or what I don't know. I'll just say it is that I think that the only reason that they're not bringing in suitcase nukes or dirty bombs across our border is I think that the U.S. Government has the ability to track, no matter how well shielded they are. I think they have the ability to track those things worldwide and track the movement of nuclear weapons grade material. And so, but I mean, I wouldn't doubt any other types of conventional weapon system has been able to be brought across, except for maybe gigantic rail guns or something like that. But I wrote I wrote a story that I never published, and this was 40, well, God, almost 40 years ago. That on one of my own trips to the Soviet Union, I was amazed at how easy it was to get across back in those days because there was no computers. They didn't know whether you had crossed previous borders. There was no way to check from one border crossing to the next what type of threat you might be at that time. And I wrote a fictional story about a young man like myself who was able to successfully bring in, and I was able to walk right into the Kremlin with a briefcase nuke. And so, and it's true, I could have done it. I could have done it myself in 1983. So I'm not saying I wouldn't be surprised at all that there are certain types of shoulder missiles or whatever being brought in across the border. I mean, it would. I hope that's not the case, but it wouldn't shock me.
Okay. One more quick question, kind of personal, but it might touch some of the people here. I haven't been to a Trump rally. I'm in Chicago. He hasn't come out here. I really, I really want to go to Butler, PA, on October 5th.
Mm-hmm.
You're an investigative journalist, boots on the ground everywhere. I know with your J6, and by the way, good luck in your trial.
Thank you.
Do you advise that um, to us, people that could be put in a weird situation? Like, it seems really, really important to me to go. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, first of all, I think it's one of the most brilliant political moves of Trump's, short political career, is to go back to Butler and reschedule and deliver the speech that he was not able to deliver that day. I mean, it is brilliant. It'll be covered. I mean, he'll get $1 billion worth of um, the equivalent of advertising. Everybody's complaining that Kamala Harris's campaign is spending, 4 or 5, maybe as much as 10 times as much as Trump is right now on advertising. He's going to, like I said, he's going to get $1 billion worth of coverage just by his return to Butler. And I think it'll be the most well protected. It will be as well protected and secure as any sitting president times 10 that day. So I don't think there's going to be any problems.
Thank you very much for your time, and please do Spaces again. This is awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, how the people up here behaved, I guess, you may just start doing this, but that remains to be seen. I listen. So we originally discussed that we're gonna do this for about 1 hour and 30 minutes, and if you want to go on, we can
Yeah,
do it a
let's
little bit
go.
longer.
We can take it all the way up to 9 o'clock. That's fine.
All right, great. So what I'm going to do now, I want to read from the comment section. So I'm going to read right now. And any errors that I make, I apologize. I have dyslexia, but anyway, I can read. Don't worry. Okay. So Kimberly C says the fact that the CIA is operating on U.S. soil is so egregious. If heads don't roll in the next administration, we are not going to be able to hold onto this country. Well, there's definitely something that I can agree with, because the I mean I mean these what do you make of this? What do you make of the fact that we have organizations that are supposed to be operating on foreign soil, but they operate here? And I don't remember where I heard this, but this is actually very smart, that there is no such thing as domestic policy. There's only foreign policy, and through foreign policy we affect our domestic policy, such as the government can't censor you through Facebook or whatever directly. So what they would do is they would go to the UK and say, listen, we want you to come out with a new law saying that you want to censor any kind of hate speech. And then the UK does the United States bidding, because we're such good friends. And then Facebook has to acquiesce, and that affects the policy here in the United States. So, and that goes to the UN resolutions and all that. So there's no such thing as policy here, as domestic policy. It's all foreign policy done through the United States. So what do you make of this?
Well, let's just go back to your original premise about agencies like the CIA operating domestically. Look, there is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The CIA, as well as the Department of Defense, despite what you think you know about posse comitatus, are operating domestically, but ostensibly they are operating against foreign threats domestically, which is where they get the right to do that. And sometimes they do that under what they call a MOU from the FBI, or Memorandum of Understanding. So suddenly a special forces unit from the Department of Defense, the Army, or whatever, might operate domestically against a foreign target. And just by the way, since we've been on the space here, I've had somebody that actually sent me a warning, a private message, and said, please be careful when referring to the quote unquote dirty tricks department It is read-in level stuff. Yes, so thank you for the warning. I'm well aware of that, and I have my dead man switches set up because I do talk about it publicly, and I'm going to be continuing to talk about it publicly. So if they do take me out, there's at least 10 other journalists that will be able to present the stories that we're working on regarding this very question right here. But the point being is that these agencies that we think are not supposed to be operating here are. We learned from a Judicial Watch FOIA request dump back here several months ago that CIA actually had boots on the ground on January 6th. Now, is that automatically a sign of the government up to bad behavior on January 6th, or that they were inciting people, or that members of the CIA or agents of or assets of the CIA were acting as agents provocateur or something like that? No, it doesn't. It means that in DC, they always operate on the basis that there are foreign threats all the time. And the larger the crowd, the larger the possibility is that there would be foreign threats. And we happen to know, beyond any shadow of a doubt, not only from Judicial Watch and that particular release through the FOIA request, but also through our own investigations, that the Department of Defense had assets on the ground that day as well. What they were doing, we're not entirely sure yet, but we're working on that. And it's something that I've been working on for 3.5 years.
All right. Let me see. The next question. Okay, so this one is from White Hat. How did they know that Daryl at? How did they know that at Daryl that the perp was there for 12 hours?
I'm not sure I exactly understand the question.
Me neither. White Hat put up a new rephrase the question so I can understand it. Okay.
Yeah, rephrase it and take somebody else's question.
Ralph was found to be in possession of a machine gun. There were no police reports of explosives. That's from stream catcher Chris.
That's not correct. We have the police report of his explosive arrest. It took place 5 or 6 months before the machine gun arrest. So we actually have the criminal records on that, and we published it.
Right. Susan says, I found it really interesting that President Trump called out Iran today. Okay, so we already covered this. Let's see. And at Tripia Veteran, the federal acquisitions process moves at a genocidal pace. It's not surprising that the UAS capability doesn't exist within USSS. What is incriminating is that they aren't cooperating with DoD for Predator or Gray Eagle support.
Yeah, again, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm understanding the question.
Me
exactly.
neither.
Yeah.
Me neither. Let's see. Is there anybody else who has any questions? Individuals, group.
Anybody have any live questions out there?
Yeah. If anybody here has a live question, please come up, and we will answer the question. Okay, I see here somebody. Okay. Somebody's coming up right now.
I want one of my good friends with the Sedition Hunters. Why don't you guys raise your hands?
Yeah, they should come up. Yeah, the Sedition Hunters, come up here. Let's see what they have to say. Okay, so first I had here Slip Mahoney. Do you want to say something, or did you just come up here?
No, I'm sorry. I came up by accident. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next one is Kim. Go ahead.
Hi, guys. Hi, Steve. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And thank you for the space, Trash and Aaron. I wanted to come up and clarify White Hat's question. He was asking, how did they know that Ralph had been at the scene for 12 hours? And I think the answer is that they had the car GPS, correct?
No, they had cell phone geo-tracking on his cell phone. They had him arriving at the fence at 11:59 a.m. the night before. And then, of course, they allegedly shot at him right about 1:30. p.m. the next day. So he'd been there right at 11 and a half hours. And then they monitored his phone. Now, everybody wants to, this is just I think it's a humorous aside. Everybody keeps talking about the 6 cell phones that Ralph had and that was found in his possession. And that must be some evidence of his tradecraft with the intelligence agencies. I have no idea why he had 6 cell phones, but I know that he had very, very poor tradecraft if he brought a cell phone to the fence line with him. So that was a mistake. And if he was groomed or trained, he certainly was not. He certainly broke his training there. If that was the
Yeah,
case.
he was not or he was not a spy employee of the month.
No, and we're not talking about he wasn't. Not only was he not the CIA, HSI, FBI employee of the month, he was not a very sharp character. In fact, the law enforcement officials in North Carolina that we've spoken to said that he was a bit of a nutcase.
All right, let's go to Big Al. Go ahead.
Hey, this question's for Steve. Thanks for this space tonight. Steve, did you see Joe Biggs with the Proud Boys? Did you take any videos of him or pictures? Because I believe he's the one that was kind of orchestrating the breaking of windows and that kind of stuff.
No, he was well ahead of me in my arrival at the Capitol, as well as my entry into the Capitol. He was way ahead of me in that regard.
Right. And so, but then Joe Biggs, I don't know if he's still in jail or not, but there's some kind of odd background with him. Is he might have been at 4th Operation Psych Ops out of Fort Bragg, and yet he was leading a group of people called Proud Boys with orange hats and maybe some Ukrainians running around. It just seems kind of odd how this all happened, and those pictures were not part of the blue Trump hats, the red Trump hats.
There are plenty of photos out there. I mean, I've had people literally accuse me of withholding video evidence of the orange hat people, of the orange tape people, the Proud Boys. I mean, it is to be perfectly honest with you, my interest in that group is totally different than everybody else's interest in that group. And I'll be getting to that story soon, but it's not for the reasons that everybody else wants to. They think I'm hiding something or I'm withholding something, or that I've literally deleted my own video of that. I never took any video of them. I wasn't there when they were marching around the Capitol and when they breached the first barricade line. I wasn't even there yet. So, I don't have any, I don't have anything to hide with regards to that. But the research that we're doing right now, and I've talked about it, so I don't mind mentioning it again briefly. But my most intense curiosity, we'll put it that way, right now, and what happened on January 6th is the Department of Defense's deployment of assets that day, and that's as much as that as I'll say about that right now here on these spaces.
Gotcha. Thanks, Steve. Yep.
Red Ranger, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, can you hear me?
Yep. Gotcha.
Good deal. I just quick question, since you're living the problem. I'm wondering, has there been any updates on the bomber, on the pipe bomber, who they had a suspect and the guy they decided not to do anything with him?
No, that's not exactly the way. There was an update yesterday from Darren Beatty with Revolver on the DNC pipe bomb story. I would encourage everybody to go look at that without me getting into it myself and trying to explain or cover his work on that. But it's something that we've been suspicious of all along, is that there's two different sets of video cameras there at the Democratic National Committee headquarters where the second pipe bomb was found. There are the better quality apparently better quality United States Capitol Police CCTV cameras, of which there were several in the area, which myself and the Blaze have done extensive work on those and with and through those cameras. And all of that's available on YouTube. If you go to Blaze TV, go to the playlist, and then select our Truth About January 6th series, you'll be able to find our videos related to that there. But the biggest curiosity is why the FBI and or the DNC itself have withheld from us the cameras and the videos that the DNC itself controls, like their own security cameras on the exterior where those benches were. They have only shown us for 3.5 years now a couple of very selective, highly edited, apparently purposely even distorted images from those cameras, but have shown us directional cameras that would be able to prove whether this guy actually placed the pipe bomb there that night or not, but they won't show it to us. But we know that they had a camera pointed in that direction. And Darren Beatty believes that they've deleted those. He thinks that they, based on testimonies that we've been able to call from, congressional testimonies and IG reports and such as that, is that it's very likely that those cameras, which would answer some serious questions, have been deleted. And I don't know if they've been deleted or not, but they're sure as hell not showing them to us. But they've shown us other footage from the same camera, and so it's very hard to believe that they would not have preserved that in their totality. So there's something being withheld from us there. Then, as it relates to the bomber itself, to my knowledge, no one has ever known who the hoodie, the scrawny, 5'7", thin, he or she, I think it's a she, person that on the evening of the January 5th allegedly dropped the bombs at the RNC and at the DNC. So we have reason to believe through testimony, through whistleblower Kyle Seraphin, who was on that task force, and then they were pulled off of a lead there, that they were actually on the trail, not of that individual, but of somebody who may have had association with that individual, and then they were pulled off of it. And that's about as far as I can go on it right now.
Yeah, and if you want some more, you should definitely look up his profile on The Blaze. You will find all of his reporting there. I'm telling you that it gets crazier. A lot of things get crazier once you really look into the pipe bomb story. Just an interesting thing.
Yeah, especially the DNC pipe bomb story, because it had much more camera coverage.
Exactly.
The RNC bomb was dropped in a alleyway behind the Capitol Hill Club. It was actually right behind the Capitol Hill Club, which is next to across the alley from the RNC, and there was no cameras down in that alleyway.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely weird. Just one thing that'll like entice the viewers to go look at that is that it seems as though the pipe bomb itself was inoperable. I think we could use that word. It was highly inoperable. The dogs were not sniffing it out. They were not reacting to it. So yeah, it seems as though the bombs were not operable. They weren't supposed to do any damage for some reason. So that only makes it even more weird. All right, let's go to Abby.
Hi, thank you. I've got a question that is not about January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
So you may want me to stop after I ask the question.
No, go ahead. Ask the question.
Last night, I got a breaking news pop up that took me to YouTube, and it was a man who had been investigating Osama bin Laden's, time period.
Mm-hmm.
The SEAL Team 6 that was destroyed, and I just don't. Okay.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
But
I'm familiar with the topic. and I'm
They
familiar with
have
the story.
they have
Eh,
turned over the
Go ahead, Steve.
No, I'm what I'm saying is that I'm familiar with that story. I have not spent enough time on it to speak to it authoritatively in any way, shape, or form, and I'm not going to sit here and just try to baffle you with my bullshit. So it's, I'm just not. I have not turned my. I've been so busy on too many other things to turn my attention to that.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to Grant Cardoon. Go ahead, Grant. Grant, are you there?
Hey, I'm just listening to the great conversation. I have nothing to add.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. There's one more person who wants to ask a question. I'm going to bring them up as speaker, and let's see. Still connecting.
I'm ready if they are.
Okay, there we go. James, go ahead.
James?
James, if you're not going to speak, then I'm going to have to kick you off.
Hello, James. Are you there? All right, we got time quickly before top of the hour here. Anybody else? All right.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Steve, I really appreciate
Can
you
you hear
coming on.
me?
Yeah, we
Can
can
you hear
hear you
me?
now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was wondering what was going on. Dean, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the mic, Steve. Thank you so much for being here. Please come back again.
Thanks.
Okay, so I don't know the answer to this. I'm hoping you do. Who has possession of Ryan Ralph? I'm hoping Martin County because I feel like they won't let anything happen to him. I don't want the feds to get their hands on him because it could be like any of the other people that they've been in charge of and they've,
Yeah. Well, I will.
you
I
know.
will tell you. I will tell you. And it's interesting that you bring that up. Just yesterday, I was having a conversation with a European intelligence community asset person, actually an operative. I'm not going to name the country or otherwise. And he actually told me in a conversation I was having with him yesterday that he hopes that Ralph does not get transferred to a federal facility, that he is not transferred out of Florida, because he said if he is, he's dead.
Okay, that confirmed what I thought.
So that's my answer right there.
Okay, well that's a great answer. Thank you.
In all of its wonderful conspiracy theory taintedness. So there you go.
Well, no, because I lived in Florida for several years, and the sheriffs down there, they don't play. They don't put up with it.
No.
So Martin County is like next to Grady, who is, I know you know who Sheriff Grady is.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I
absolutely.
just wanted to ask who had possession, and hopefully they're going to be able to keep possession. I don't mean to make him sound like a thing, but all right. Thank you so much. You're wonderful.
My pleasure. Thank you. Hey, let's do one more and get out of here. What do you say, guys?
Yeah,
I was
sounds
going to
good,
say,
Steve. Yeah, let's do that.
I consider Grady Judd to be my sheriff, even though I'm in the county next to him. He's awesome.
That's great. All right. Anybody else? Any closing?
Okay, I picked out one person at random. So if anybody didn't make it up here, sorry about that. Z, go ahead.
Hey, so real quick, the main thing that I have is moving forward, do we really have any confidence that the people that are responsible for all the things happening, is there any accountability going to happen, or are we going to have a lot more of the same? That's my main thing, is like I feel that no matter how bad things get, the accountability factor is never there, and it's probably the most frustrating thing that I deal with. I don't know.
Yeah,
What you think?
the answer is clear. There's no accountability for two reasons. Number one, we virtually control no segment of the government whatsoever, and then other people will go, "Oh, well, the Republicans control the House. There must be some ability to bring accountability there." Yeah, but let me tell you, you don't think the GOP is not as infiltrated with progressivism and assets working against this country.
Exactly.
I mean, you have no idea, and this is a story I wrote. Go back, go. I can't remember the title of it, but it was one of my Capitol Police stories. There's a reason why the Capitol Police as a, I'm not, there's some good cops there, but, they're generally disparaged as nothing more than, mall cop security guards, or they are, glorified tour guides inside the Capitol. It's not fair. It's not true. There's some really good men and women in that service, and there's some highly skilled people as well. But more importantly, regardless of whether they're the Keystone Cops or they're the greatest law enforcement agency in the world, is really immaterial. What they are is they are the people that act as the Praetorian Guard for the people that lead our country. And as the Praetorian Guard, go back and look at your history. They know everything. They know all the peccadillos of all the leadership in both the Senate and the House for generations, as well as today. They're what they call their dignitary protection detail. They have special agents, and they have dignitary protection uniform cops that travel with these people all over the world, with these congressmen all over the world, congresswomen. They know everybody they're sleeping with. They know every drug they take. They know what sexuality they really are, as opposed to what they claim to be on television. And because they know so much, they themselves are able to control, with their information delivered to the people that need information to control the votes. It's one of the reasons why we're so confounded and so utterly disappointed with the quote unquote opposition party so many times over and over and over again. Why do they not vote in the manner in which they promised when they were running for office? And they were courting the votes of conservatives, of libertarians, of more freedom oriented people. And
Yes,
there's an
sir.
answer.
And so is there hope? I mean, that's what I'm getting at is, I
It's
mean,
going to take a wrecking
it's
ball. It's going to,
is
yeah.
there hope?
Now,
Can we
wait. What hope are you looking for? Like, all right, so like first of all, like we had a bunch of people up here. Steve, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Like, what
Yeah.
hope are you talking about? Like, I don't understand what you're talking about here, man. Like, what hope are you talking about? We dismissed a lot of speakers, but like, what hope are you talking about? Like, I don't know that Steve has an answer for this. I don't know that Aaron or
I
myself has
think
an
I
answer.
think I'll take a stab at it. I'm because I hear this frustration literally every day. I'll take a stab at answering the hope. The hope that we will start seeing something better and more effective than strongly worded letters coming out of the Judiciary Committee. I
That's
mean,
fair.
I
Yeah.
mean, Jim Jordan wrote a strongly worded letter after my arrest back in March, demanding that the Department of Justice turn over all of their communications related to my case. Now, this is the committee that oversees the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice has never responded, ignored them, basically flipped them the middle finger, and Jordan's committee has never followed up. I have a personal animosity towards that situation, towards that committee, towards Jordan in that regard. I've met with Jordan. I've met with Jordan face to face. And despite the fact that I have a lot of reasons for being disappointed in him on a personal level, it was my meeting with him that actually got me access to his own
Yep.
investigators in the
Yep.
weaponization committee, who have been tremendous assets to some of my work. And that is a direct result of my face-to-face meeting that I had with him. And yet I'm disappointed. And it's not just my strongly worded letter. We can go down to 1,000 examples of this. And I think that's the frustration that he's trying to enunciate here, is
Yeah.
that
Fair enough.
we don't have the results from the people who are promising us those results. Now, you go over to the Senate. We have, we're not going to get any help over there. Not as long as the Democrats have control of that branch, or that house of Congress. And we're not going to get any results so long as Harris, Biden, Obama still controls the presidency. Yeah, you heard me right. And we're not going to get any results from the Department of Justice until that department is decapitated and reorganized. And the only way that that's going to happen is the promise, and it's another promise. There's no guarantee, but the only hope we have is that there's a follow through in the current promises from one, named, former President Trump in his current candidacy for the office again. If he follows through with his promises, he unleashes RFK Jr. He brings in Elon Musk, to oversee an 80% slashing of all of the government
Yeah.
departments, like Malay down in Argentina. If we get something like that, then we'll see some results. But I don't know, man. Is there hope? That's all we have. That's all we have is hope right now. That's
I
it.
mean, that's all we have, right? It's
Yeah.
like maybe RFK gets in charge of like HSS or like the FDA or whatever they may be.
Yeah.
Maybe Nicole Shanahan gets a hold of comms, and maybe just maybe this MAGA unification party type apparatus that
Right.
we get some answers.
Right.
Yeah, like I think we're all fighting for the same thing here. Like I'm a small L libertarian. I'm not a conservative. I'm not a Republican. Like I'm definitely not a Republican, but I'm definitely not a Democrat either. I'm a small L libertarian, moderate type person that just wants answers, and I seem to be aligned with a lot of people that want those same answers, Steve. And
Yep.
and I think that you have been more than gracious with your time, but you're also saying the same things that we're saying here, is
Yep.
that like we want answers, we want accountability, we want, all right, let's get the best people in there for the job. And if we can get those people in there for the job, then maybe just maybe we can fix this country, and maybe just maybe we can get to a path where we get these answers. um
Yeah.
dude
Yeah.
dude Steve, thank you so much for this space. It's
Thank you,
been
guys.
yeah,
Yeah, Steve.
Aaron, go ahead.
But yeah, Steve. Before you go, I want you first to tell us your if there what to look out for on your reporting on the website. And before you do, everybody right now, if you're interested in to see what he's been reporting on, up on the bubble, up on the Megatron, Teletron, whatever you want to call it, is the link to the Blaze website. Go there and write to one of his stories, which we talked already about. Go there, you'll find everything you need to know. You can click on his profile on the Blaze and you'll have all of his reporting. Okay, go ahead, Steve. Let us know if there's
Yeah.
anything else that you're working on.
Yeah. The one thing that we've been promising for about 4 months now is we have it's probably 4 or 5 months ago we released our trailer to our final video series on the United States former Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn. It's called A Day in the Life of Harry Dunn, and we've decided to release it in 3 parts now. So the part 1 is in its final edit. I saw what I think is going to be the final edit today, and if that is the case and it's signed off on by our editors and such, we should be rolling that out early next week, if not on Monday itself. I'm very excited to finally get that down because we've been promising it for a long time. But as I said earlier on these spaces, people got to quit shooting at Trump so I can get my work done that I want to be doing, and that's one of the big projects that's been on the burner for a long time. And the reason why it's important, it's more topical today than it ever has been, because as you know, Harry Dunn not only ran for Congress recently and lost in the primary, but he also has been out on the road campaigning originally for Biden. Now he's out on the road campaigning for Harris. He's continuing to stay in the public eye. And our series, again, if you want to go back and look at some of the other things that we've done about Harry Dunn, I don't have a I don't have a personal animosity towards Harry Dunn. It's just that everything he's ever said about January 6th is a lie, and we're going to show it and prove it finally in one final kill shot here. He has lied in testimony before Congress. He has lied in testimony in January 6th cases. He's lied prolifically in his own book. And we're going to show, by virtue of the evidence of the Capitol CC television, that the guy couldn't tell the truth if he wanted to. That everything that he said he did, everywhere he said he was, at whatever time he said he was going to be there, everything that he either wasn't doing what he said he was going to do, or he was doing something completely different than what he said he was doing, and at a different place and at a different time. And it is just it's a mess. But the reason that I focused on Dunn is because, specifically more than anything else, of the fact that he contributed to the unfair and invalid convictions of the Oath Keepers in those trials. And that's because he was suborned into perjury in cooperation with another Capitol Police officer, Special Agent David Lazarus, and they colluded in a story that is a massive lie that we've been able to conclusively prove was perjury by our video access that we had in Capitol CCTV. So there we go. That brings it full circle to the very first comments I made 2 hours ago. So thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. And
thank you, Steve. You've been more than gracious and generous with your time. Thank you very much. And I hope to see more of you. I will be watching you on Gonzalez tonight, right?
Yeah, go. That's right. At the exact same time that we started this at 6, I had pre-taped my appearance tonight on the Sarah Gonzalez Unfiltered show on Blaze TV. So that's up there on YouTube. Everybody can go watch it for free right now. All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good night, guys.
All right, Trash.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, this has been great. You want to end it right now?
Yeah. I think we should probably close it up. Like, Steve, thank you so much, man. I think that we have a lot to talk about moving forward. I also think that like what Steve is talking about in retrospect, in his past, in his present, is very prescient. And I think that a lot of things that we discussed tonight was actually a big deal. So thank you guys for coming into the space. I appreciate you guys. Love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow night. Actually, I'm actually going to hold a space tomorrow night. I want to talk about all this because, like, what we talked about tonight was fucking heavy. It was huge. I'm here for it, and we're going to talk about it tomorrow night. We have a lot of shit to bring up tomorrow night. I will probably join Spaces tonight. I'm on left coast time, so that means it's 6:10. So I'm going to eat some dinner. I'm going to do my thing, and then I'm gonna join some more Spaces tonight. And I love you guys. This was a huge get. This was a huge get.
Yes, absolutely. By the way, I just want to make sure that the audience understands. By the way, I just want to give you also a shout out, Trash, because you just came from out of country.
Dude, I was
landed.
in China. Like I was in fucking China. Like I arrived. Yeah.
We organized this like last, more or less, it was a last minute thing, and we actually organized it. So hell yeah, we're actually doing stuff. So guys, these things do not happen out of nowhere. These things take time and a lot of talking behind the scenes. So Trash, you did awesome. Thank you very much. This has been a very good conversation.
So good, man. And I hope to see you guys soon. I love you guys. I love you Americans. I love you guys that love America outside this country. I fucking love you guys. And I can't tell you enough. We have like 38, 39 days, and you have people like Steve Baker. You have Aaron Political Doxy, who has been out here doing these things, who has pressured me, who has pushed me. He was like, Aaron, listen, I'm doing these things. I'm like, bro, I'm in the fucking airport. Like, calm down. Like, stop pushing on me. Like, I got shit to do. He's like, no. We're going to have a space, and we're going to have Steve in here, and we're going to talk about these things. I'm like, yeah, of course. We're going to talk about these things, of course. But also, like, we have some great American patriots out here. We got some great American patriots inside the Trump campaign. When they're being pushed and pushed upon, we've got like people like America Mission and Jen Lawrence and Dustin Stockton, all these people that are pushing on these things. We've got my friend Millie Weaver, and we've got Political Savvy. savvies out here in the Trump campaign. We get a lot of people that are trying to push forth the interest of this country. And Steve Baker, being a libertarian, he's not a conservative or a Republican or a Democrat or whatever. Like, he has his own views. But there are people out here doing the fucking work. And if you're not following these people doing the fucking work, then what are you doing? And so, like, maybe our alliances move with the Blaze. Maybe our alliances move with Fox News. Maybe our alliances move with many of the other independent media allies. But we're all out here trying to make a difference, and we got 38 days to do so. And then we got another 4 years to do so. Then we got another 8 years to do so. Then we got another 12 years to do so. So I appreciate you guys coming in here, and we had a great get. Steve Baker, that dude, I fucking love Steve. He's fucking great, man. He's been in the trenches. He's taking hits and being arrested and being shoved in the gulag. And I think that people like him and people like even Glenn Beck, fuck, man. Even people like Sarah Gonzalez and people like even myself, who nobody knows who they are going to be at the forefront of the next generation in the avant-garde of the information warfare. And I think that I'm very grateful to speak with people like this. So, Aaron, thank you very much for the space.
Thank you. All right, then. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.